All right, we have another reaction video for you guys today. It's Huberman's Lab, and this is the first time we've actually done Huberman's Lab on this channel, which is quite shocking because I am such a big fan of Andrew Huberman, so I hope it's timely nonetheless. On this clip, we have Robert Greene, who you may know as the author of 48 Laws of Power, among many other evocative books. Regardless if you're a fan, let's check out what he has to say with Andrew regarding alive, thinking, anxiety, and creativity, and try to pick apart the philosophical bits in there if we can. So let's get to it.
I think hearing about a book is great. Reading a book is even better. Thinking about a book that you read is even better than that. And then writing down your own ideas and writing a book, well, that's the big win, right? And that's what the world, I believe that's what the universe wants from us. Not necessarily to write a book, but translate what I just said to any number of different endeavors.
Yeah, you want to be able to think for yourself, right? So you're not just absorbing ideas from other people and kind of mimicking them and kind of just learning the exteriors of their ideas. You want to kind of digest them and then have them slowly become your own ideas.
You want to
by
integrate.
interacting with them, and by putting them through your own lens. So someday it's a book stirring in me is the art of thinking and how to use that kind of process and go deeper into it. And I talked a lot about it in one of my podcasts, which might be the seed of a book. But it's the difference between dead thinking and alive thinking. Ideas can be either alive or they can be dead. And an alive idea is something that enters your brain from an external source, a philosopher, an article, somebody you admire, somebody you hate. And then you absorb it and you think about it and you decide, I'm going to turn it around into this, and I'm going to make it alive, and it's going to make it something that's part of me. Another part of an alive idea is you have an idea that comes to you about a book or a project or something about the world, and you go, maybe that's not actually true. Maybe the opposite is true. And you go through a process and you cycle through it on and on, and you reflect on it and you refine this idea. And maybe it turns into its opposite. And through the process of reflecting and correcting and revising it, you turn it into something living, something alive within you.
This really begs the question of where do ideas come from, right? I think we have yet to really understand where they do come from and if they're just a reflection and fragment of all of our experiences around us, or if there's something inherent about ideas that only come uniquely through us, regardless of the external experiences that we have had. But I think rather than dissecting that and trying to figure that out in the moment, what I do think that is so unique about ideas is that even if they come from an external experience of yours, when you integrate and transmute them throughout your perspective based on your past and how you view the world, that perspective, those ideas, those concepts can only come uniquely through you. And there's a beautiful writing from Martha Graham, who's known as like the godmother of contemporary dance, who wrote to her best friend Agnes. This is decades ago now. Highly recommend you check it out. Just type in letter to Agnes from Martha Graham, I believe. Essentially what she says to her best friend in this letter is that your ideas and your creations are not for you to judge, decide. Your only job is to let the portal open. Keep the channel open for that creativity to flow through you, or else it cannot exist through any other medium. And I think this is something we should really be considering when starting something new, because it's so easy to get discouraged at the beginning when you think, oh, what do I really have to offer in this sphere, or am I really going to provide something different? And you are the difference, that you are only uniquely you, and whatever it is that you see the way through and what you're creating is going to be unique in and of itself, and it is your job to let that flow through. You can capitalize on that. But let's get back to this alive thinking we're hearing about.
On and on and on. And what prevents people from going through that process, which would be the subject of my book, is basically anxiety. Because I think how you handle anxiety is the most important kind of quality in life. It'll determine whether you will be successful, whether you will find your career path, or whether you won't be able to. I don't know if you can follow that idea at all. But anxiety is a signal to you that you don't understand something, that there's a problem out there that you can't resolve. And so what happens to most people if you're insecure is you glom onto something instant and easy to get rid of your feeling of anxiety. I don't understand this problem. Oh, it must be A. A must be the answer because this person said that, right? And so you don't develop the ability to think. You don't develop the ability to go to the next level. But if you take that anxiety and you go, all right, maybe A is an answer. And then you start going through A and then you go, no, maybe A isn't the answer. Maybe B is the answer. You're able to surmount your anxiety and go past it, come further and further and further. You don't rush for the first available answer that's out there, right? You're able to go through a process of refining things. And so in your career, if you're anxious for success, if you're anxious for money, you're going to make the wrong choices. But if you're able to deal with that anxiety and say, maybe I have to think more deeply about where I'm going, I have to come up with other alternatives, then you're going to make a much better choice, on and on and on. So if you're a creative person, it's very, very challenging to have that blank piece of paper before you, that book that you haven't written, that film or whatever. You're filled with a lot of anxiety, and you have to deal with it. And if you're able to turn it into something creative and productive, then great things will happen. You'll create a masterpiece. So the ability to deal with anxiety and to not give in to the most instant gratification that you can get is, to me, a marker of somebody who will be creative and will invent something, as opposed to people who just recycle old and dead ideas.
Very fascinating. I think what he's saying is very congruent with simply being patient. There's a very renowned quote by Soren Kierkegaard who says that anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. So as an existentialist philosopher that he is, of course, he believes that your life is indicated by the choices that you do make and the freedom of that choice. So when you look at that from the perspective of anxiety, his belief is that because you have so many available choices at hand, your anxiety is actually that paralysis by analysis, where you're like, oh my gosh, I have so many choices and I'm anxious because there could only be one right one. And that's what's stirring up that angst within you. Right. So and that's a surface level element to that. But I think when we apply it here to, again, starting something new or creating something and developing a thinking process, there is a patience that has to be exhibited. But I think what's more important is alongside that is that when you're patient, you have the ability to then use that time to use your deductive reasoning to, again, back to the beginning, integrate the ideas and actually think about them. Because you're right, you don't want to just be a mouthpiece for what you've heard around you, but you can compound on those ideas by integrating them and thinking them through your unique lens. And that's what makes these new ideas so profound, and that's how we expand and evolve as humanity progresses forward. But when you're just starting something new and have, let's say, as he had mentioned here, Robert, the blank page in front of you, that could be daunting because of all the supposed potential routes that you can go with that you can take, that page can take place, right? Where you can write so much and you don't exactly know where to start. And that is anxiety ridden and also can be very discouraging. But what I want to leave you with here is that I think it's so important to not be afraid of making the wrong choices. And if you kind of look at it that way, it's not about making wrong choices or being destructive with your reasoning. You have to be extremely constructive and again, deduce within reasonable fashion. But I think when you actually just rid yourself of this idea that there's this one right way and then everything else is wrong, you start to inhibit yourself and you paralyze yourself and you stop yourself from taking any action, because you need to learn how to develop a working model in your mind. And that just means getting right to it, making a decision and being able to adjust on the fly as long as it resonates with what your end goal is. And that's why people talk about this idea of North Star. Having a North Star brings about so much clarity in your life for the choices you do make, because everything you do will service that North Star, that goal, that mission, whatever it might be in your own words, right? And yes, again, I believe that's incredibly important, but just don't fear wrong choices. Because if you know your intentions are good, you know that you are progressing towards your goal and that you're going to be of the utmost service to yourself and the people around you, be willing to be a little bit gritty with it and just play around and see exactly what happens when you make a choice, and then you can develop from there. Just compound and you can start working right from the beginning. And it is interesting because you'll be able to almost find your creative process within that, rather than trying to find your creative process and then start. It usually doesn't happen that way. It just usually happens from getting to it. And people who have that willingness to break that barrier also, interestingly, happen to not be so concerned with what their identity is in that particular moment. Because, for example, if you're a writer, if we're going to go back to the book example with the empty page, and you think that if you write something down that's crappy, then you start to take that personally within yourself and they go, I must be a bad writer. And I think that's where we find that friction. It's not really about that. Being a great writer, a filmmaker, an illustrator, whatever the case might be, the ability to get going and learn as you follow through and be able to learn from the people who had existed prior from you and be able to add your own touches along the way, that's where creative genius really starts to come together. I think Robert points out a really interesting relationship between anxiety and creativity, because that anxiety can inhibit you because of the amount of choices that you think of you have, and also just because you take your own work personally, which you should. But as soon as you start becoming destructive and having destructive thoughts about it, that's where it becomes very detrimental, right? So have you experienced this in your life? I know I definitely have. There are many times where there's writer's block, and there's many times where I postpone the starting of a new project simply because I don't think I have all the answers right away. But interestingly enough, the things that I have found most success in so far are the things that I had just got to and committed to learn along the way, rather than trying to understand everything at the forefront. But I think there's much more to say about this here.
Amen to that. I was once told that anxiety makes children of us all, and not in the positive sense of being childlike.
Yeah.
It regresses us to a mode where we feel a complete lack of control. And I completely agree that being able to manage anxiety and dance with it, since we can't rid ourselves of it.
Yeah.
No, perhaps nor should we, right? Because it's a signal, as you point out, that we don't understand something, that there's something to get curious about.
Yes,
right? A process
exactly.
or something out there, or both. I think.
Just quickly, to transmute that anxiety into curiosity is wonderful. If you could say, okay, there's anxiety here, there's some friction, there's some blockade in front of me, use that as an opportunity to say, what can I actually learn from this? Not to be so cliche, but it is very useful. And instead, look at it through the lens of curiosity. There's something here I don't know because of, again, the vast amount of options available to me. But when you can be curious and understand the most effective model to move forward, that is true improvement, and you feel that right away. So it's a very effective process.
That really resonates.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people will benefit from hearing that, because I think we hear the word flow and we just all imagine. I even catch myself imagining that, when Robert Greene sits down to write, it's like there's a blank sheet and then he just kind of meditates and then boom, out come these books. But if I get realistic for a second, I'm sure that there's a lot of inner turmoil and anxiety.
Oh my God, you have no idea. So
it's a battle sometimes.
My process is 95% pain and maybe 2.5% ecstasy. And I don't know what the other 2.5% would be. But so I write a story, because in my new book and most of my books, I always begin with a story from history, etc. And it is so bad. I can't believe how bad, how flat it is, how it sucks. I'm so embarrassed. I hate myself. And then I go and I dig into it and I start changing the words in it. I start making it a little bit better. The second version, it's kind of palatable, but it still sucks. If I let it out into the world, it'd be...
See, he's willing for it to suck. That's where creation really happens, is willing to get into the dirt of it all and be like, look, it's okay that this is shitty right now. It's okay to have those moments. You don't have to take that too personally or too hard on yourself, or it doesn't mean that you're never going to be what you aspire to be. It actually, on the other hand, means that if you continue on this route, you will be what you aspire to be, because that curiosity and evolution of your process will just keep pushing you forward. So I'm really enjoying this.
Embarrassing. It's anxious, and my wife can tell you I'm a miserable being when that happens. Everything looks black to me at that point, and I push through it. So if I gave in to my anxiety, and this happens with a lot of books and writers, I would just put out that second version, which isn't very good. It isn't very strong. It isn't thought through, because my ideas, when I look at them the first time, I go, that's not real. That's not the actual thing that's going on here, Robert. You've missed the mark. Yeah. You want to hit what's actually real in that story. But I can tell you, the feeling of fulfillment when I finish a chapter is pretty damn great. When I finish a book, it's better than any kind of drug experience anyone could ever have. It's such a wonderful feeling of accomplishment.
That's pure.
Pushing past all the barriers. So my process involves a lot of anxiety and dealing with. That's why I'm talking about it and why I want to write a book about it.
What's so fascinating here is how do you really know when your ideas are fully fleshed out? Because technically speaking, you can always continue to revise and edit and improve and evolve anything that you're doing creative, especially when it has subjective merits to it. And if you just simply say, well, it's based on how you feel, sometimes your feelings can fool you into believing that you have a finished piece when really all you're trying to satisfy is a sense of self and a sense of praise from other people because you want to get it out there. But I really appreciate his transparency here, because Robert is essentially saying he focuses and cares so much more on craftsmanship. And that's what I think is so damn cool, is that he really does care about the art of it all. And if you care about the art, it will be true to you. And I think that ends up becoming so much more fulfilling than one can ever imagine. I think that was jam-packed. If this had provided any value to you whatsoever, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. It means more than you know. And we'll be seeing you on the next one. Thank you so much.